This is an article that came out in the New York Times, March 21st, 2018. Why outer suburbs in the East and Midwest have stopped booming. Many counties, including rich ones, are aging and experiencing more deaths than birth without growth through immigration or migration. Take a look at this map. The red is showing you the deaths, which are now outpacing births in the US. Wow. And as you can see, it goes up every 5 years on this particular map. That's 1991, 96, 2001, 2006, 2011, 2016. Look how red the map is. You can't hide this. You can't hide it or deny it. Plain and simple. Hunterdon County, New Jersey is rich, which is very true. It's probably one of the richest counties in New Jersey. It ranks sixth nationally among counties in median household income and has for decades exemplified the American outer ring suburb. But in one crucial measure, this exuberant enclave 60-mile west of Manhattan resembles old mill communities in northern New England or impoverished regions of Appalachia. The measure is death as compared to birth, otherwise known by demographers as natural increase. But this is not an increase. This is negative. That's what it is. And as you can see right here, Hunterdon County residents gave birth to 3,590 babies between 2013 and 2016. But even more residents, 3,647 died. So you can clearly see there were it was less births than deaths. So it's really true. Now, when you go back 4 years, 2 decades earlier, there were 5,882 births and 2,947 deaths, which is the norm. But you can see that's no more. And as you can see on this chart, the gray line are the births, which are below the red line, which indicates death. With new county-level census population estimates due out this week, demographers will track not just the population gains and losses, but the components of change, births, deaths, and the movement of people. And while migration, which counts people moving both domestically and immigration, gets most of the attention, changes in birth and death patterns are increasingly important. Some American communities that until recently were considered demographic boom towns are now caught up in a downward demographic mix. Young people having fewer children, the baby boomer generation getting older, and migration patterns stalled by the recession are resuming, but only in certain parts of the country. Through 2016, about 1 in 4 outer ring suburbs were experiencing more deaths than births, including 18 of 30 such counties in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Some of the once fastest growing counties in the United States are growing no more, and nationwide the birth rates has dropped to levels not seen since the Great Depression. Wow. It is one of the biggest puzzles. Now, this demographer is just talking about the changes that they have noticed. So I'm going to go down a little bit. More than 1,200 counties in the United States, home to 1 in 7 Americans, have a negative natural increase in population in 2016. In total, 1,700 counties experienced a negative natural increase at least 1 year this decade. For many counties, this makes migration especially important for population stability and growth. Counties in the Northeast and Midwest that have traditionally lost residents to the South and West are having a harder time propping up their population numbers. Some maintain their numbers because of immigration, but American immigration policy is now a subject of debate, and a smaller number of immigrants would put more pressure on counties facing population loss. The nation's sprawling growth pattern has taken its share of criticism. It's associated with long distance commuting, environmental degradation, and urban decay. But population stagnation in places that had been growing will most likely bring its own set of problems, including pressures on real estate value and eventual shrinking of political representation. And it starts with babies, which we know people are not having as many today as they did years and decades before. The estimate lifetime birth per woman is down 16% from a recent peak in 2007. New Census Bureau projections say that Americans over 65 will outnumber children under 18 for the first time in U.S. history by 2030, and that a rising number of deaths will increasingly offset how much births are able to contribute to population growth. That's going to be very hard. Right now, the baby boomers are the last biggest population right now. So if they're not giving birth, there's no way they're going to be able to replace the baby boomers that are currently dying out. Migration dropped significantly during the recession, Mr. Johnson said, but has returned to pre-recession patterns abate at all slower pace. Florida, Texas, and Arizona have all seen population inflows resume. For example, while states in the Northeast and Midwest that were losing residents to migration have resumed losing them. Births, on the other hand, have not returned to pre-recession patterns. They've instead skewed sharply in a negative direction. The number of deaths continued to rise during the recessionary period, but births have yet to rebound from the impact of the recession, Mr. Johnson said. This has been most pronounced in places that have long struggled economically, but it's also now increasingly common in well-off suburbia. In many areas, young people, besides having fewer children, are not as enamored of the suburbs as previously, the previous younger generation. And that is true. I live in the suburbs, and then in the township that I live in, there are fewer people now. You know, before there used to be a lot of people, but that has changed dramatically. This is especially true in cities experiencing urban rivals like New York. Millennials don't want to be in outer suburbia. Yeah, most of them want to be in the city. That's very true, said James W. Hughes. Okay, so whereas previous generation of young couples streamed ever further out to the suburbs in search of larger lots and lower taxes, The current crop prefers Brooklyn, Jersey City, and other locals close to the urban core. Perhaps the largest symbol of Hunterdon County shifting demographics, Mr. Hughes said, is the million-square-foot octagon office building that lies abandoned in the county's lush woodlands. Merck erected an environmentally friendly facility of 460 acres with much publicity in the early 90s, only to pull up stakes 20 years later and move back to the suburb interring. Wow, look at that. That was a big facility. Actually, I had a friend that worked in this very facility for Merck, you know, and it's not surprising. There are so many places that are closing. I even noticed it around me. When they built it, no expense was spared. Now it just sit there, Huge said. And though local officials recently announced the company was in negotiations with a buyer, that facility is ginormous. I've been there a few times, but I had a friend that worked there for a few years. And Merck was the largest pharmaceutical in New Jersey. And I didn't work for Merck. I used to work for Bristol Myers Squibb. So I had one friend working for this pharmaceutical. I knew quite a few people that were working for the pharmaceutical companies back then. Okay. Population has grown rapidly for years in the 11 outer ring counties of the New York metropolitan area, Mr. Hughes said. But those counties are all like Hunterdon, shrinking with slow migration and more deaths than birth. Enrollment in some Hunterdon County school districts is down by as much as 20%, he said. And although the plenty of older residents remain in place, they will most likely end up paying more to live there as the tax base shrinks along with the population. The birth-death ratio is declining fast in the suburbs of large cities. So, um, I remember a time when the suburbs were booming. Now, believe it or not, it has switched. The cities are now booming. All right. So in 2018, there were 1.9 births for every death in what Brookings term emergent suburbs, places like Hunterdon County, where the suburban foothold has not yet overtaken the rural character. Less than 10 years later, the ratio had dropped to 1.5, roughly the rate of rural America last decade. Not only are many outer suburban counties aging, but they also tend to be disproportionately white, said Mr. Fry, which probably contributes to the falling birth-death ratio in suburban counties, since the birth rate is especially low for white women. In some parts of the South and West, the birth-death imbalance is masked by increasing migration, which still drives population growth. The suburbs there are still popular and attract local, national, and international migrants. Yet, many counties in the north are net exporters of migrants. More people leave than move in. Very true, because that's how it is around where I am. Mr. Johnson said, I'm just going to go down a little further. All right. The only other time we've been in a situation like this has been in the Great Depression itself. There was a drop in women having children, especially young women, and they never made up for never having children young when they got older. So there you go. So they're acknowledging that this drop in birth is mainly impacting the white community. But many of these things we already know, but this really kind of cleared the air that this thing is real and it's still going on. And as you can see from this interactive map, it gets very red. Every 5 years, it gets very red. So you can clearly see all the deaths that are occurring in the country are not being replaced by births. Wow. Please tell me what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell and please share these videos. Peace, family.